The academy loomed over the city like a monument to the stars. Towering spires of crystalline metal pierced the artificial sky, their surfaces pulsing faintly with the hum of quantum energy. Suspended bridges connected the floating platforms, where students of every known species drifted in and out of glass-walled lecture halls. Holograms flickered, displaying lessons in languages both spoken and unspoken. This was Ve'El'Arin, the pinnacle of intergalactic education, an institution that shaped the minds of future leaders, strategists, and pioneers. And Siva did not belong. She stood at the edge of the grand hall, her violet skin shimmering faintly under the biolights embedded in the walls. A sea of students passed her by without acknowledgement, their robes pristine, their movements effortless. She had learned not to expect anything else. Ve'El'Arins were a species defined by mental superiority. Their telepathic network allowed them to communicate instantly, their minds interwoven like strands of a great cosmic tapestry. A single thought could be passed across a room, a city, a planet. Words were primitive, unnecessary. Siva, however, was silent. Her mind was fractured, a dim signal struggling to connect. Where others moved with the grace of their shared thoughts, she hesitated, isolated from the unspoken world around her. She could not hear them, and worse, they could not hear her. But it wasn't just her mind that marked her as different. She glanced down at the empty sleeve pinned neatly to her academy uniform. Her missing arm was the first thing people noticed. The second was the way they quickly looked away. To be physically incomplete was an anomaly in Ve'El'Arin society. Advanced medical technology could regenerate lost limbs, repair shattered bodies, even transfer consciousness into artificial constructs, but only if the mind was strong enough to sustain the process. Siva's mind wasn't. She had been born this way, a genetic failure in both body and mind, a Ve'El'Arin who could not bond, could not heal, could not belong. And yet she was here. The academy had accepted her, though she had no illusions as to why. She was an experiment, a case study in what happened when perfection faltered. She had no allies, no unit. The Ve'El'Arians had rejected her, and the other species followed their lead. To bond with a failure was to invite weakness. She tightened her grip on the tray of untouched food. It was nothing more than a nutrient block, flavorless and functional. She wasn't sure why she even bothered taking one anymore. She turned to leave, retreating to the solitary corner where she always sat. And then he walked in. The hall fell into a hush. A ripple of curiosity passed through the crowd. Not through spoken words, not through thoughts, but through the shifting of shoulders, the subtle turn of heads. Siva followed their gaze. A human. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark eyes that saw too much. His hair was a mess of deep brown waves. His uniform somehow already slightly disheveled, as if he had fought with it before putting it on. Jeremy. Siva had read his name from the Academy's database. The only human in this year's class. The only human at all. He walked with an easy, unbothered confidence, like he hadn't just stepped into a place where he wasn't wanted. His boots thudded against the smooth floor, a jarring sound in a hall that had no need for words. And then, against all reason, he looked straight at her. Not at the golden-hazed Ve'El'Arians seated in their perfect, elegant formations. Not at the reptilian scholars of the Kavari delegation. Not at the synthetics whose holographic forms flickered in and out of view. No, at her. Siva stiffened. Her first instinct was to turn away, to vanish into the background like she always did. But before she could, he was moving toward her. The Ve'El'Arians watched, their psychic link buzzing with unspoken disapproval. A human? Approaching her? Jeremy didn't hesitate. He dropped his tray onto her table, the impact making the silverware jump. Then he sat. Not across from her, not at the adjacent seat, but right next to her. Close. He smelled wrong. Not unpleasant, just different. a mix of something clean but earthy, something that carried the scent of unfamiliar worlds. Siva's entire body went rigid. No one had ever sat this close to her before. Jeremy glanced at her tray. That looks like something they'd feed prisoners. He picked up his own meal. Some kind of protein-packed human ration. Took a bite and grimaced. Yeah, mine's not much better. She stared. Not at his food. At him. He had spoken, out loud. No one spoke at Valoran. Telepathy was silent, efficient. Words were clumsy, unnecessary. He had to know that. Wait, she asked, before she could stop herself. Jeremy paused mid-chew. Why what? She gestured awkwardly with her remaining hand. Why talk? Jeremy swallowed, then smirked. Because I can't do the whole mind magic thing. He tapped his temple. Tried, didn't work. Kinda felt like someone was stabbing my brain with a fork, so I figured I'd stick to good old-fashioned speech. He said it so casually, as if not being part of the network wasn't the greatest failing someone could have. As if it didn't matter. No one else in the hall spoke, but Sci-Fi could feel their gazes pressing down on her. Why is he talking to her? She knew what would happen next. He would realize who she was, what she was. He would see the empty sleeve, the way her mind barely flickered, the isolation that surrounded her like a force field. And then he would leave. They always did. But Jeremy just took another bite of his food, chewed, and, without looking at her, said, You got a name, or do I just call you broody purple girl from now on? She blinked. Siva. He nodded as if that meant something. Nice to meet you, Siva. Simple words, casual, unremarkable, but they settled inside her like gravity. No one had ever spoken her name like that. Not as an obligation, not as a burden, not as a mistake. Jeremy didn't leave. And for the first time in her life, someone had looked at her, seen everything wrong with her, and stayed. Siva had spent most of her life on the fringes of conversations, of corridors of existence itself. She had learned not to expect company. Yet now, for reasons beyond her comprehension, a human had settled into her orbit. Jeremy didn't just sit with her. He made himself comfortable. He sprawled across the table, eating without reservation, unconcerned with the stares burning into his back. The Valerans, with their practiced elegance, dined in silent precision, their movements fluid, deliberate. Jeremy, in contrast, ate like a human. Loud, messy, and completely unbothered by decorum. Siva was used to invisibility. She was not used to being a spectacle. She shifted in her seat. You should sit somewhere else. Jeremy glanced up, chewing. Why? Siva hesitated. The words sat at the edge of her tongue. Because they're watching. Because they disapprove. Because you don't want to be associated with me. Instead, she said, because I prefer solitude. Jeremy snorted. No, you don't. Her shoulders stiffened. I do. He pointed a half-eaten protein bar at her. You're alone, but that doesn't mean you want to be. She inhaled sharply. Valerians were mind readers, but this human, who had no psychic abilities whatsoever, had read her. Her gaze dropped to the table. Why are you speaking to me? Jeremy took his time answering. He leaned back, drumming his fingers against his knee. Honestly? She nodded. Because you were the only person here who looked like they might actually talk to me. He gestured at the rest of the room. The others? They're all in their heads, talking with their fancy brainwaves or whatever. It's like walking into a party where everyone's texting each other and you don't have a phone. Siva blinked. She had never heard telepathy described like that before. Jeremy popped the last bite of his protein bar into his mouth. So yeah, you seemed like the only person worth talking to. That logic shouldn't have made sense, and yet, A strange warmth stirred in her chest. She looked at him, truly looked at him. His uniform was slightly wrinkled, like he had never bothered to smooth it out. His left sleeve had a small tear, hastily stitched. His hands bore faint scars, as if they had once done work far rougher than whatever he had signed up for at this academy. He was not polished like the other students. He did not move with the precision of someone bred for greatness. He didn't belong here, any more than she did. A thought surfaced, unbidden. He might actually mean it. She quickly buried it. "The others won't accept you," she said instead. "Humans are unpredictable. They dislike that." Jeremy shrugged. "I'm not here to be liked." That surprised her. Everyone at Vale Rin had a purpose. To earn prestige, to secure alliances, to carve a path to power. "Then why are you here?" she asked. Jeremy hesitated. For the first time she saw cracks in his easy confidence. His hand clenched into a fist against his knee before he forced it to relax. He exhaled slowly. "It's complicated." Siva knew deflection when she saw it, but before she could press further, a cold voice cut through the air. "Human." A Valerian male stood before them, tall and immaculate in his academy robes. His golden skin shimmered beneath the overhead lights. His silver eyes narrowed in open disdain. Two others flanked him, his unit, no doubt. Jeremy didn't bother standing. He barely looked up. "Yeah?" The Valerian's lip curled. "You are a mistake." Siva felt the insult in the air before the words were spoken. A psychic whisper rippled through the room, a silent agreement among the others. Jeremy, however, merely arched an eyebrow. "You always this friendly, or is it just my lucky day?" The Valerian's expression didn't change. "Humans are unfit for Vialarin. You have no place here." His gaze flicked to Siva, sharp as a blade. "Neither does she." The words shouldn't have hurt. She had heard worse. But Jeremy only laughed. Laughed. A full, amused, genuine laugh. The Valerian stiffened. A few students turned in confusion. Siva stared. Jeremy wiped a non-existent tear from his eye. "Man, you guys really take yourselves seriously, huh?" He leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. "Gotta be exhausting." The Valerian's composure cracked, just slightly. You think this is amusing?" Jeremy's grin didn't waver. "I think you're trying real hard to make me feel small, and it's just not working." Silence fell over the hall. The Valerian's jaw tightened. A telepathic wave crashed over Siva, a mix of irritation and cold, precise anger. It was meant for Jeremy, but he couldn't hear it. Siva, however, could. She knew what was coming before the Valerian even moved. The boy's hand shot forward, aiming for Jeremy's throat. Fast, practiced, the strike of someone trained in precision combat. But Jeremy was faster. He caught the Valerian's wrist mid-strike. The room froze. Jeremy's grip tightened, just enough to make a point. Then, slowly, he pushed the Valerian's hand aside and released him. His grin had vanished. "I don't care if you don't like me," he said, his voice calm, dangerously steady. "But if you ever try that again, we're gonna have a problem." The Valerian's nostrils flared. His silver eyes flashed. But he didn't strike again. He only glared at Siva, as if it were her fault. Then he turned sharply, disappearing into the crowd, his unit trailing behind him. The tension in the room remained. Jeremy exhaled and picked up what was left of his food. "Well," he said casually, as if he hadn't just defied an entire species. "That was fun." Siva's mind reeled. He had no idea what he had just done. The Valerians were powerful, their social structures intricate and unyielding. Insulting one, humiliating one, was not something easily forgotten. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. Jeremy took another bite of his protein bar. "Yeah, well, I'm not great at doing what I should. Siva's missing limb ached. A ghost sensation, a reminder. You've made an enemy, she warned. Jeremy smirked. Wouldn't be the first. She didn't understand him. He wasn't bonded. He wasn't wanted. He had nothing to gain by defending her, nothing to prove by standing his ground. Yet he had done it anyway. And against her better judgment, she wasn't sorry he had. The training hall of Narration was a monument to discipline and precision. Its towering walls, constructed of dark crystalline metal, absorbed sound, creating an eerie silence broken only by the distant hum of energy fields. The floor beneath Siva's feet was smooth, yet unyielding, its surface embedded with faintly glowing geometric patterns, ancient battle algorithms designed to shift the terrain mid-combat. Here, perfection was expected. Every student moved with the elegance of a practiced warrior, their bodies and minds synchronized through an unspoken bond. Siva did not belong here. She knew it, the instructors knew it, the other students knew it. But today she had been given a partner, and that, more than anything, set the academy buzzing. She stood in the center of the training circle, her single hand clenched into a tight fist. Across from her, Jeremy lounged with an ease that was almost offensive. His uniform, already slightly wrinkled, was a direct contrast to the pristine, polished students surrounding them. His boots were untied, in a hall where every thread was expected to be perfect. He had the audacity to look like he'd just rolled out of bed. And he was supposed to fight with her? Siva exhaled sharply, forcing her nerves into submission. This was a mistake. The academy should have left her out of this exercise, as they always had. Forcing her into a bonded combat trial was cruel. She had failed every attempt before. She would fail this one, too. Jeremy didn't seem concerned. "Choose," he said, rolling his shoulders. "How exactly does this bonded combat thing work? We hold hands? Do a trust fall?" Siva didn't even glance at him. "It requires synchronization." "Right," Jeremy nodded, "which means—" She turned, leveling him with a cool stare. "It means we have to fight as one mind, predict each other's movements, anticipate shifts in the battle before they happen. A perfect union between warriors." Jeremy smirked. "Oh yeah, this is gonna go great." A ripple of amusement flickered through the Valerian's psychic link. Siva felt it pressing against her mind. Subtle, condescending. She hated that she could feel them, even if she could never join them. She wasn't supposed to be here, and now she was dragging a human down with her. Professor Lyron stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. "Combat partners will engage in a standard trial against a bonded Valerian unit. Synchronization will determine your ranking. Begin when ready." Siva's pulse quickened. This was going to be a disaster. Jeremy cracked his knuckles. "All right, who are we fighting?" Two Valerian students stepped forward. Precise, poised, and undeniably lethal. They moved in absolute unison, their steps perfectly measured. They didn't even need to look at each other. Their minds were already linked, their bond an unshakable bridge of shared thought. Siva and Jeremy? They weren't even standing at the same angle. Jeremy tilted his head. "Huh, so we got telepathic ninja twins. Neat." The Valerian opponents did not react. They didn't need to. Their minds had already assessed the fight before it even began. Siva felt her throat tighten. She had fought bonded Valerians before. She had never won. Professor Lyron raised his hand. Everything happened at once. The first Valerian lunged, too fast for a human to follow. Siva moved instinctively, shifting sideways to block, only for the second opponent to cut her off, forcing her into a weaker position. Jeremy, predictably, was nowhere near where he should have been. The Valerian strike aimed directly at Siva's exposed ribs. She braced for impact. And then Jeremy did something stupid. Instead of blocking like a trained fighter, He stepped into the attack, catching the Valerian's wrist at the last second. Instead of stopping the force, he redirected it, twisting just enough to send their opponent staggering. Siva's breath caught. That wasn't psychic precision, that was improvised instinct. The Valerians hesitated, a flicker of confusion passing through their link. Siva knew why. Jeremy fought like chaos. The second Valerian adjusted instantly, twisting towards Siva in a seamless counterstrike. Siva tried to dodge, too slow, but Jeremy was already moving again. This time she moved with him. It wasn't synchronization, it wasn't a bond, it was reaction. Jeremy didn't anticipate her movements, he didn't need to, he just adapted, his body shifting into the spaces where she wasn't. Their opponents faltered. For the first time, Siva was not a liability. And for the first time she felt herself pushing forward instead of falling behind. The Valerians readjusted. The psychic link between them pulsed, strengthening as they recalibrated their strategy. Their attacks became sharper, faster, relentless. Siva and Jeremy fought back. Not as a bonded pair, not as a single mind, but as something different. Jeremy was unpredictable, adjusting his stance at the last second, moving in ways that made no logical sense. Siva had spent her whole life failing to fit into Valerian precision. Now, for the first time, she didn't have to. She let herself fall into his rhythm, not perfect, not telepathic, but effective. She saw the moment the Valerians realized they had lost control of the fight. It was a brief flicker, so brief that no one but Siva would have noticed. They hesitated. Jeremy exploited it immediately. He struck low, forcing one of them off balance. Siva caught the shift and redirected the second opponent's attack before they could recover. The match ended in a stalemate. Silence fell over the hall. Siva's breath was ragged, her heart pounded. She had fought in a trial before. She had always lost. She had never lasted this long. Professor Lyran studied them for a long moment before nodding once. Acceptable. A murmur spread through the crowd. Jeremy wiped sweat from his brow, grinning. Hell yeah, we're acceptable. Siva didn't speak. She was still trying to process what had just happened. She had fought with no one. She had bonded with no one. But for the first time in her life, she hadn't fought alone. Valerian Academy thrived on control. The corridors pulsed with quiet efficiency, students moving in perfect synchrony, their thoughts intertwining in the silent language of the Valerians. Every step, every glance, every decision was calculated. Siva had spent her entire life on the outskirts of that order, a ghost drifting through a world that had no place for her. But now, she wasn't invisible anymore. And that was dangerous. The moment she and Jeremy had stood their ground in the combat trial, everything had changed. She had felt it the second they left the training hall, the way eyes lingered a moment too long, the way whispers followed in their wake. Not the usual dismissive murmurs, but something more calculated. Jeremy, of course, didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't care. You realize we made history today, he said, grinning as they walked through the Academy's towering corridors. First human Valerian fight pair that didn't immediately crash and burn. We should get a medal or something. Siva shot him a look. It was a stalemate. Details. He waved a hand. The important thing is, we didn't die. You almost did. Jeremy smirked. Yeah, but I didn't. That's what makes it impressive. She exhaled sharply and kept walking. He followed. She had assumed he would disappear after the trial, return to whatever reckless existence he had before he decided to sit next to her that first day. Instead, he had stuck close, as if they were an actual unit. And now everyone was watching. She could feel their silent judgment like static in the air. The Valerians had always ignored her before, dismissing her as a failure, but now she was a problem, because she had bonded with no one. Yet somehow she had fought beside a human. It wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. Jeremy sighed dramatically. Man, I really thought doing well in a fight would make people like me more. Guess I'm still public enemy number one. Siva kept her voice low. They're trying to figure out what you are. He raised an eyebrow. A guy who can throw a decent punch. A human who didn't fail. Jeremy's grin faltered slightly. He shoved his hands into his pockets. Guess I'm ruining their whole humans are useless theory. Sveta didn't answer because the truth was, he was. And Valeren wouldn't let that go unnoticed. The first sign of trouble came the next morning. Siva arrived at her usual training station only to find it gone. Her access code had been revoked. The training program she had been assigned to, one of the few she had ever been allowed into, had been erased from the system. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the rejection message flashing across the holographic display. She had expected retaliation, just not this quickly. Well, that's not subtle, Jeremy said, appearing beside her. She turned sharply. What are you doing here? He shrugged. I figured if you didn't show up, it meant someone was messing with you. Looks like I was right. Siva clenched her jaw. This was a message. Not just to her, but to Jeremy. The Academy would not accept what they had done. This was a mistake, she muttered. Jeremy frowned. Fighting well? Letting you stay close. She met his gaze. You don't understand how this place works. Jeremy crossed his arms. Then explain it. She exhaled. Valeren doesn't need to punish you openly. They just make it so you don't exist. Training access revoked. Dorm reassignments. No combat trials. No resources. You become... Jeremy blinked. Wow, they're really pulling the passive-aggressive power move. This isn't a joke. I know. His tone was quieter than usual, more serious. She hesitated. He was listening, not brushing her off, not making light of it. Listening. And that made her next words harder to say. You should stop sitting with me. Jeremy studied her, unreadable. You want me to? No, but that didn't matter. It's the logical choice, she said instead. If you separate from me, they'll let it go. Jeremy tilted his head, and if I don't? She didn't answer, because she knew exactly what would happen if he kept standing beside her. The Academy would break him. She had seen it happen before, to students who stepped out of line, who resisted the structure, who refused to conform. The Academy didn't need violence to eliminate threats. It just wore you down until you either complied or disappeared. Jeremy sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, Siva, I get what you're saying. Really, I do. Then he looked at her, and the reckless amusement, the easy-going arrogance, it was gone. I don't leave people behind. A simple statement, unshakable. It made something tighten in Siva's chest, something unfamiliar and unsettling. Before she could respond, a sharp voice interrupted. Jeremy Solis. They both turned. Standing in the corridor was Professor Lirin. The Valerian instructor was unreadable as ever, but his silver eyes rested on Jeremy with calculated precision. The head council has requested an audience. Jeremy blinked. Why? That is not for me to say. Siva's stomach twisted. This was too fast. She had expected the Academy to turn against them eventually, but within a single day... Jeremy shot her a look. Guess I'm making a name for myself. This isn't funny. He sighed but nodded. I know. Then, to Lirin. All right, lead the way. Siva watched them go, an unfamiliar weight settling in her gut. She had warned him. She had told him this would happen. But he hadn't left, and now she wasn't sure if he ever could. The council's judgment. The chamber was massive. its walls lined with pulsing crystalline structures that resonated with the energy of the Veilarian elders. Jeremy stood in the center, his stance relaxed but not careless. The elders sat in a curved formation, their expressions unreadable, their presence heavy. Even without a psychic link, Jeremy could feel the weight of their collective thoughts pressing against the air. One of them spoke. "You are disruptive." Jeremy sighed. "Yeah, I get that a lot." Another elder's gaze sharpened. "Your presence challenges our structure." Jeremy tilted his head. "Because I fought well?" A pause. Then, "Because you fought well with her." Jeremy's smirk faded. There it was, the real reason. It wasn't just about him being human, it was about Sci-Fi. Because she was never supposed to function here. And now, with him, she had. Jeremy exhaled, crossing his arms. "Let me guess, you're going to tell me to stay away from her?" The elders did not answer. Because they didn't have to. And for the first time, Jeremy realized this was not a warning. It was a test. Would he comply, or would the academy make him disappear? He squared his shoulders. They were about to find out. The halls of Vale Rin felt colder than usual. Siva had walked these corridors for years, always keeping her head down, always avoiding notice. Now, for the first time, that was impossible. She and Jeremy had done the one thing the academy couldn't tolerate. They had disrupted the order. The Valerians weren't ignoring her anymore. They weren't dismissing her as a lost cause, a defect, a mistake. They were watching. Their silver eyes followed her as she moved through the academy, their thoughts brushing against her mind like distant whispers she could never quite hear. They were waiting for what she didn't know, but she could feel it closing in. And then Jeremy walked out of the council chamber, his face unreadable, and she knew their time had run out. The final warning. Siva found him where she expected, on the observation deck, leaning against the railing, staring out at the endless sprawl of space. The light from the planet below cast shifting rings of gold across the Academy's metal flooring, a reminder of just how high they were above the rest of the galaxy. He didn't turn when she approached. "It gave you a choice?" "Not a question." Jeremy exhaled slowly. "Yep." She waited. And then, quietly, "They want me to leave you behind." Something in her chest twisted. She had known this was coming, had braced for it. It didn't make it hurt any less. She forced herself to nod. "Then you should." Jeremy let out a sharp laugh, not amused, not angry, just tired. "You really think that's going to happen?" "You don't understand." She tightened her grip on the railing. "The Academy doesn't need to punish you. They just erase you. No record, no explanation. One day you exist, the next." She stopped herself. Jeremy glanced at her. His dark eyes searched her face, reading something she wasn't saying. "What happened?" he asked. Siva's stomach nodded. "What?" "You said you've seen them erase people before." He turned fully to face her. "Who?" She shouldn't answer. She had spent years burying the memory, pretending it didn't exist. But Jeremy was waiting, and somehow he was the only person who had ever waited for her. So she told him. "There was another student, years ago, Jalen." She swallowed. "He wasn't like me. He was strong, brilliant, but different. He started asking questions about the academy, about its rules. He wanted to know why some of us didn't fit into the bond network." Jeremy stayed silent. One day he just disappeared. She stared at the stars, focusing on anything but the weight of that memory. No one talked about him after that. His records were wiped. His room was reassigned. It was like he had never existed. Jeremy exhaled slowly. "And you think that's what's going to happen to us?" She forced herself to meet his gaze. "It's already happening." The Academy wasn't killing them, it was making them irrelevant. And soon, if they stayed, they would be nothing at all. Jeremy studied her for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. "All right," he said. "Then we leave." The escape plan. The problem with escaping Velarin was that no one ever left. It wasn't a school, it was a fortress. Security systems tracked every movement, every access code, every transport leaving the station. The artificial intelligence linked directly to the Valerian psychic network meant that a single alert would bring an entire fleet down on them. They had one shot. Jeremy, of course, had no hesitation. "Ooh, we steal a ship," he said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. Siva stared at him. "Do you even know how to fly?" He grinned. "Define, no." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "This is a terrible idea." "Good and well. It's better than waiting for them to erase us." She hated that he was right. The training hangars stored smaller vessels, not warships, but fast, lightly armed fighters, the kind of ship designed for maneuverability over firepower. If they could get inside undetected, they might have a chance. The issue? The moment the system detected unauthorized launch activity, they'd have half the station chasing them. Jeremy naturally had a solution. "Break something important," he said. "Cause a distraction." Siva frowned. "What kind of distraction?" He grinned. "Trust me." She absolutely did not. But there was no time to argue. They split up. Jeremy went to cause problems. Siva went to steal a ship. The training hangar was eerily silent. Siva's heart pounded as she moved through the sleek corridors. Every step felt too loud, too noticeable. Her access code had already been revoked from combat training. If the Academy had updated the security locks here, she was already dead. She approached the docking bay console and held her breath as she pressed her palm to the scanner. It flickered, processed, and then access granted. She let out a shaky breath. Not erased yet. The ship was sleek, compact, designed for speed, not war, not meant for deep space travel, but a ship was a ship. She climbed into the cockpit, fingers hovering over the unfamiliar controls. She didn't have time to second guess. She had to move. Then the alarms blared. Red lights flooded the hangar. The Academy's AI voice resonated through the station. "Security breach detected." Siva's stomach dropped. Jeremy. She bolted from the cockpit, heart hammering. She had seconds before the hangar went into lockdown. If she waited, the ship would be useless. If she left, footsteps, running. She turned just as Jeremy sprinted into the hangar. He wasn't alone. Behind him, 3 Valerian enforcers closed in. They moved too fast, too precise, trained warriors in perfect psychic sync. Jeremy skidded to a stop, breathless. "Okay, so, turns out, distract them actually means piss them off really bad?" Siva cursed under her breath and slammed the ship's engines online. "Get in." Jeremy didn't argue. He vaulted into the co-pilot seat just as the first enforcer reached the ship. The door hadn't sealed yet. A hand caught the edge. Siva reacted without thinking. She twisted, slammed the emergency override on the opposite side of the hatch, forcing it shut with enough force to crush anything in its path. The enforcer barely yanked his hand away in time. The door sealed shut. Jeremy whistled. "Damn. Remind me never to get on your bad side." She ignored him, gripping the controls. "Brace." And then she launched them into space. Nowhere left to run. The ship tore through the planetary rings, breaking free of the Academy's orbit. Behind them, alarms screamed as pursuit ships launched in response. Jeremy checked the display. Siva, we've got 6 ships on our ass." She focused on the vast emptiness ahead. There was only one way out. She pointed at the screen. "That!" Jeremy squinted. "The Lassing Rift? It's a gravitational anomaly. Chaotic, unpredictable, No one follows ships into it. Jeremy grinned. Sounds perfect. She set their course. Behind them, Valen ships closed in. Before them, the rift pulsed, a shifting storm of light and shadow, swallowing everything that entered. Jeremy exhaled. Well, this is either the smartest thing we've ever done, or the last. Siva didn't answer. She just pushed the ship forward, into the unknown. The Lassen rift swallowed them whole. Their stolen ship hurtled into the churning abyss, past fractured moons and drifting wreckage. The rift was a graveyard of lost vessels, a place where navigation failed, where even light seemed reluctant to exist. Siva fought the controls, her single hand white-knuckled against the flight stick. Gravity twisted unpredictably. The ship shuddered as spatial distortions threatened to tear it apart. Behind them, the Valerian pursuit ships hesitated at the rift's edge. For all their power, even they feared this place. Good news, Jeremy said, gripping the dashboard as the ship lurched violently. I think we lost them. Siva didn't look away from the swirling chaos ahead. Bad news. Jeremy winced as a warning light flashed red. I'm pretty sure this ship is coming apart. The hull groaned. The left thrusters sputtered, struggling against the shifting gravity wells. Siva's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She adjusted course, weaving through the rift's chaotic terrain. If they didn't find a way out soon, the rift would consume them. Jeremy flipped through the ship's navigation logs, frowning at the rapidly failing systems. Tell me we have a plan, he said. Siva barely heard him. Her mind was elsewhere, not on the ship, not on the rift, but on the last few weeks. On the silent halls of Valerian, on the way everyone had always ignored her, on how she had spent her entire life expecting to be erased. But now, against all logic, she wasn't alone. She had never intended to bond with anyone. She had never expected someone to fight for her. Yet here they were. Jeremy nudged her shoulder. Siva, Earth to Siva. Wait, is that offensive? Veil to Siva? She exhaled sharply, refocusing. I'm trying to find an exit. Jeremy gestured at the shifting maelstrom outside. I think the rift is trying to eat us, so yeah, great idea. She ignored him. Her fingers danced over the ship's console, running calculations, searching for a pattern in the chaos. Then, there, she pointed at the screen. There's a gap in the anomaly's cycle. If we time it right, we can slingshot out using the gravitational pull. Jeremy blinked. That sounds like something that should be impossible. She glanced at him. It probably is. Jeremy grinned. Well, in that case, she braced herself. Then, without hesitation, she pushed the ship forward. The leap of faith. The rift fought them. The ship's engines screamed in protest. G-forces slammed Siva against her seat, every muscle burning from the strain. Jeremy cursed as alarms blared. This is a terrible plan. I know. The ship spun wildly as gravity twisted around them. The rift was collapsing inward, pulling them deeper. They were seconds from being lost forever. Jeremy reached over, hand gripping hers over the controls. Together. Siva inhaled sharply. She didn't need a bond, not the way Valerians did. But she had this. With one final push, she wrenched the ship free. The rift spat them out. For a brief, terrible moment, they were weightless, suspended in the silence of space. Then, stillness. The ship drifted into calm, open stars. No alarms, no gravitational distortions, no pursuit. They were free. Jeremy let out a stunned breath. Holy. Siva cut him off. We made it. He turned to her, still gripping her hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, human. She had spent her life believing she would always be alone. Now, for the first time, she wasn't. Jeremy's gaze softened. So what now? Siva exhaled. Now we find a home. Jeremy smirked. Think the universe has room for 2 outcasts? Siva hesitated, then quietly, I think it always has. Jeremy's smirk faded slightly. He studied her, something unreadable flickering behind his dark eyes. Then, without warning, he leaned in. A hesitation, brief, uncertain, a silent question. Siva answered. Their lips met, soft and unsure, the first step into something neither of them fully understood. No telepathic bond, no silent voices, just this. Jeremy pulled back slightly, smiling against her lips. Yeah, he murmured, this might work. Siva let herself believe it. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly before them. And, for the first time in her life, the future felt like hers. The stars had never felt so vast. Siva stood at the viewport, watching the endless black stretch beyond the ship's hull. The rift was far behind them now, swallowed by distance and the quiet hum of space. They were free. But freedom, she realized, was terrifying. She had spent her entire life knowing exactly what was expected of her. Even if she had never belonged at Valen, its structure had always been a cage she understood. Now, there were no walls, no rules, no plan except the one they made for themselves. She should have been afraid. Instead, for the first time, she felt alive. Behind her, Jeremy was sprawled across the pilot's chair, boots propped on the dashboard like he owned the place. He looked infuriatingly comfortable for someone who had just defied one of the most powerful institutions in the galaxy. Whoa, he said, stretching. What's next? Siva turned. You're asking me? Jeremy grinned. Well, I figure you're the brains of this operation. She snorted. That's concerning. His grin widened. Right? We're screwed. She shook her head, lips twitching despite herself. The truth was she had no idea what came next. They had no home, no allies, no resources except a stolen ship and a mutual refusal to be erased. And yet, she glanced at Jeremy. They had this. Maybe that was enough. Jeremy tilted his head, studying her. You're thinking really hard over there. She exhaled. We need a plan. Jeremy. Okay, fine. He sat up, rubbing his chin. Let's see. We've got an entire galaxy to explore. We're probably wanted criminals, and we have no idea where we're going. He flashed a grin. Sounds fun. Siva rolled her eyes. That's not a plan. He shrugged. It's a start. She sighed. He wasn't wrong. Then, quietly, they won't stop looking for us. Jeremy's expression sobered. He nodded. Yeah, I know. The Valerian elders wouldn't just let them disappear. The Academy didn't allow loose ends. They had escaped, but they were still unfinished business. Then we make it so they can't find us, Jeremy said. Siva frowned. And how do we do that? Jeremy leaned back, tapping the side of the dashboard. Well, first we ditch this ship. Too easy to track. Second, we change our names. Get some new identities. She raised an eyebrow. You say that like it's simple. It is, he said confidently. We just have to find the right people. She hesitated. She had never been a risk-taker, never made a move without calculating every possible outcome. But Jeremy, he didn't hesitate. And maybe that was why they had survived. All right, she said finally. Let's do it. Jeremy grinned. That's the spirit. A new beginning. 3 days later, their stolen ship touched down on a dust-ridden outpost at the edge of known space. The planet was a far cry from the sterile halls of Veolin. Its skies were a murky gold, thick with heat and the scent of machinery. The city sprawled in tangled layers, metal stacked on metal, a labyrinth of forgotten places and people who didn't want to be found. It was perfect. They moved quickly, sold the ship under an alias, paid off a technician to erase their flight records, and blended into the crowds of off-worlders looking to disappear. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Siva no longer existed. She was someone new. Jeremy, of course, thought the whole thing was hilarious. "You're officially a criminal now," he teased as they slipped into a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of the port. Siva shot him a dry look. "So are you." "Yeah, but I've always had that vibe." She sighed. "That's not a good thing." Jeremy grinned. "Debatable." She shook her head, but there was no real frustration behind it. The truth was, she felt lighter. For the first time, she wasn't waiting for someone to cast her aside. She wasn't an outcast, wasn't defective, wasn't a failure. She was just Siva. And that was enough. Jeremy nudged her. "All right, genius, we've got new names, a new place, and..." He patted his pockets. "Exactly 0 credits. What's next?" Siva glanced at the bustling outposts around them. Merchants bartered under flickering neon signs. Bounty hunters leaned against their speeders. Engineers haggled over spare parts. Opportunities. She turned back to Jeremy. "We find a job." His eyebrows lifted. "An honest job? Or a fun job?" Siva crossed her arms. "Jeremy?" He grinned. "Fine, fine. Honestish." She exhaled. "That's probably the best I'll get, isn't it?" Jeremy winked. "Absolutely." She shook her head, but she was smiling. They left the bar behind, stepping into the crowded street. Above them, the sky stretched wide and boundless. There were no more walls, no more chains. They had made their choice. They had won. And as Jeremy fell into step beside her, Siva no longer feared the unknown. Because wherever they were headed, they were going together.